Well, thank you so much for that introduction, Roseanne, and for this such a rousing introduction to the whole afternoon. My name is Laura Bliss. I'm the West Coast Bureau Chief at CityLab, which is part of the Atlantic Magazine based in San Francisco. I'm a national reporter focused on technology's influence on urban space with a focus on transportation. I'll just again thank Roseanne and Sherry and Larissa and the whole Samcita crew for having me here today and be part of this great conversation. I think my talk is a little bit less locally focused than many of the other speakers today. I'm sort of a recent Bay Area transplant and I cover national issues, but it's definitely a topic that's both close to my heart and certainly to issues that the whole peninsula faces on transportation, including San Mateo County and its neighbors. And it's the bus. Consider the bus. What comes to mind? For many Americans, it's the grumbling, clattering, stuck in traffic, when will it come, cars in the shop, last mobility mode of resort. Mobility mode of last resort. You might not ride it, and if you do, you might not like it. That's why we need to talk about it. The bus has rarely needed your love more, and the underdog of transit has never held more heroic potential. With urban populations and travel on the rise, transportation is now the top contributor to US greenhouse gas emissions. Nearly 90% of commuters in this country drive private cars, and in many urban areas, traffic congestion, as you all are so aware, i.e. wasted time, gas, and money, is getting worse. Cities are searching for ways to move people around in fewer vehicles and leave a softer impact on the environment, with light hail referenda, ride-hailing partnerships, autonomous shuttle pilots, dreams of aerial taxis, and more. All of these modes have a place in the urban present and future, but many cities are ignoring what is arguably the cheapest and most flexible option, general purpose option, which happens to be available already, and that is the bus. Buses can carry large numbers of people in a compact amount of road space. They don't require special rights of way, though sometimes that's ideal. They can be deployed and rerouted as needed. Across modes, they're the most affordable option to cities in terms of capital costs and often in terms of operation. And there's no inherent reason that buses have to be bottom shelf transportation. It's just that we've treated them that way. Nationwide, federal, state, and local budgets have systematically prioritized cars over mass transportation. Service cuts that tore up bus networks across the country during the recession haven't been made up for. That's largely why bus ridership declined in 31 out of 35 major metros last year. Even in cities on major rail building bonanzas like LA and Denver are watching transit ridership decline across the board, in part because investment in buses has trailed so far behind the commitment to trains. And this is a chart that's showing transit ridership since 2002. And you kind of see a drop-off in transit overall, and particularly so for buses. Meanwhile, the hype around on-demand apps like Uber, Lyft, and Via fuels the notion that the future of transportation is one where traditional transit has ceased to exist. Where we're going, we don't need buses, I'm told. We'll take flying Ubers or subterranean Teslas or something even newer and shinier. And while those modes may indeed have a place in the urban future, the bus, which has been around for centuries, is pretty vulnerable to that kind of end is nigh narrative. Suburban communities in Florida, Texas, California, and beyond have replaced old bus routes with subsidies for demand response services and hope for the best. Cities like San Francisco and New York have watched 8 to 12-seat semi-flexible microtransit shuttles follow routes almost identical to popular bus lines, but with mixed success because these are operators who expect to turn a profit. In one story I recently reported in a town in Ontario in Canada, which subsidized Uber rides in lieu of a traditional bus line, found riders dismayed when there was a cap eventually placed on the number of rides that they could take. And one woman told me that she would never hear a bus driver in Toronto tell her that she'd run out of trips that she was allowed to take. Part of the downturn in bus ridership has been attributed to the rise of ride-hailing, as fewer Americans who can afford other options choose the bus. Who could blame them? In many cities, buses are painfully slow, they arrive with big gaps or all bunched together. Their routes and schedules can be Byzantine and inscrutable, and a rider's ability to track them in real time is woeful. They break down a lot. More than 17% of the bus systems in the US are in a state of bad repair, according to the most recent FTA report. And in most spread out unwalkable cities, you'll get there faster with almost any other mode. And this is a map of transit agencies around North America that have partnered with ride-hailing agencies to supplement transit, which might be, in some cases, great. But as I was sort of pointing out, sometimes it's to make up for cuts. So who's left? The individuals riding buses to jobs, to shopping, to medical care tend to be poorer than the average commuter. They are disproportionately people of color, reinforcing the racial stigma associated with the bus in many areas. Some riders, bus riders, can't tap into Uber-like services because they can't afford to, or they use a wheelchair, or don't own the necessary technology. If your transportation options are limited, you need the bus now, maybe more than ever. And even if you're not a regular passenger, you need it too. It's not hard to see how the trend of deprioritizing buses will continue to harden in the age of on-demand door-to-door rides. The problem is our streets can't fit them. If you care about how well your city moves, how your local economy is faring, and how the planet's future fares, then you care about the city bus, and you care about making it better. You want to see the bus as a piece of social infrastructure that the whole city or metro area can take pride in, a sign of prestige, not decay. Because it turns out that when rubber-tired fleets are treated as a mighty social good, people do willingly hop on. So see the Minneapolis A line, where buses are essentially held to the standards of rail service. They get first go at traffic lights, accept boardings at every door, stop every half mile rather than every block. Lots of cities have followed the example of Houston, which overhauled its bus route network in 2015 and saw a pretty substantial ridership jump. Look most of all at San Francisco, Phoenix, and Seattle in particular, which this slide is showing a GIF from, which are the only cities where bus ridership has meaningfully ticked up in recent years because they've all had citywide plans to fund and improve service. And that kind of attention has been missing, I think, in a lot of places. So to bring it back to me, that's why I've really focused on buses as part of the future of transportation, I think more than many other reporters queued to the same topics. I try to look at what's working on bus systems across the US with the belief that there's really no inherent reason that they can't be great, reliable forms of transportation. I look at which cities are sort of winning the battle to prioritize road space, where the gold standard is being set for frequent, fast, and reliable service, and how those kinds of offerings can really change the vision for future of transportation visions. And I also look at how technology can improve those fundamentals. Automation is definitely coming, and it could transform surface transit too. Sharper GPS and smartphone tools can really transform the experience of riding and the expectations around it. Electric buses can banish the grumble and smoke of the diesel era. And the idea is certainly not to be anti-Uber or any other emerging mode, but just to say that in addition to these new services, longstanding options are here to stay, and they have a lot to add. After all, it's telling that even while transit agencies are being told to be more like Uber and Lyft are also mimicking buses in many ways. Both companies have shuttle and line services, and some of them have preset stops and routes that operate during certain hours, similar to a bus. And it's existential for the future of these companies, right, to stop subsidizing high-end solo rides, by and large, and get more riders per vehicle. In other words, the basic model, a large moving container with lots of people in it, hasn't stopped working, but from what I can tell, it's time to make it a lot better. So thank you, and if you liked what you heard or want to read more, I invite you to visit CityLab.com, and I'm sorry that the link is so washed out, but part of The Atlantic, and you can also follow me on Twitter @Ms. Laura Bliss. Thank you very much.